For the final input, I'm pleased to welcome on stage Kei Kawamura, co-founder and partner of the Studio Banana, a design agency remaining the experience of working and learning through community-led environment. A warm welcome for him.
Thank you, Celine. I'm going to ask you one thing, is to drop your telephones for about 3 minutes. Only 3 minutes. Don't be shy, Lucas. I'm back. All right, enough. We're getting close to lunchtime. I understand. Thank you, everyone. I'm Kei Kawamura. Celine, thanks for your intros. You might be asking yourselves, well, I came here for a Web3 conference, and what's this guy doing on stage making us clap and do the Mexican wave? Well, bear with me a few minutes. Hopefully you'll understand why I've just done this little experiment. I'm an optimist. I think it was half successful. All right, as Celine mentioned, I'm Kei Kawamura. I'm an architect by training. I'm the co-founding partner at Studio Banana. We're a design agency, and we help organizations reimagine the experience of work and learn through community-led environments. So we create environments that activate communities. Not very different to, I think, the intention here at the gallery, the bigger purpose of creating this hub for Web3 ecosystem. Over the years, we've been working with lots of organizations of very different types, from public administration, intergovernmental, corporations, NGOs, startups, scale-ups, Teal, Holacratic, you mentioned, very different organizations. We've also had pretty cool experiences in the space of crowdfunding, and also in a very special type of organization, which I've drawn lots of lessons from, and today I'll share some of them with you, which are accelerators, incubators, hubs, places where there's a vibrancy of a whole ecosystem that's trying to break something, make something new. We've worked with crypto, we've worked with biotech, fintech, food tech, prop tech, very different ecosystems, creating these kind of hubs and accelerators. So some of the things that I'll share with you today are lessons that we've drawn from those experiences. The theme that Decentrum kind of asked me to open up now, and hopefully we'll continue afterwards also during the panel discussion, is future-proof companies, or my take is future-proof organizations. And from my experience, from our experience, what makes an organization truly future-proof is not having the best talent, is not having the best customer service, is not even offering the best product. That's all great, but really what makes an organization future-proof, and by future-proof I mean sustainable, resilient, able to overcome all sorts of challenges, uncertainties, and changes around, is to mobilize an authentic sense of community. And I'd like you to focus on these last 3 words, authentic sense of community. And that's precisely what we offer to organizations we work with. Through design, we create environments that activate communities. Now, this is easier said than done, and we've heard today already several times this notion of community, of DAOs, of villages as well. Communities feel magical when you're part of a community. But it's not by magic that they happen. They happen for different reasons. And what I'm trying to, or what I will try to share with you today is our experience with some of the basic conditions needed in order for a community to become vibrant and resilient. Mm-hmm. And there's no silver bullet here, there's no formula, it's not a cookie cutter thing that you can just reproduce. Okay, I'm making a new community. But essentially, there are 3 stages through which any community, in our experience, once again, needs to go through. And if the intention here at the gallery is to create this hub, this vibrant community, I recommend you to follow some of these. The first one is spark a flame, which is a little bit what I was trying to do here with Lucas and Sabil and the people behind. And I was sparking the flame. I was just, doing like this, looking a bit goofy here on stage. Then you need to stoke the fire. You need to bring people into that cause, into that mission, into that initiative that you've just sparked. At that point, you need to let go certain things. I was hoping when I came here on stage that it was going to go smooth, left, right, everyone would get it. It wasn't quite like that, but I just let you go with it. And then it's really important that you pass the torch. You give the leadership to the people in the community. It cannot be centralized, otherwise the community will not be resilient. And remember what I said at the beginning, it's about future-proof organizations. It's about becoming resilient. It cannot be all centralized and dependent on an individual or a limited subset of people in this community. Now, 3 warnings. At each stage, you will need very different things. At the beginning, you need courage. You need someone goofy, someone with no stage fright to come here on stage and do, something funny. So you need courage. And I mean, what I'm seeing here already is very courageous, creating here in Öpfikon, of all places, in the Vorstadt of Zurich, this hub where we're showing NFT art pieces, where we're bringing a community. I think that's courageous. When you stoke the fire, you need energy. That's really when you can make it or break it. That's when you need to identify who are the key players, who are the champions in this community, and fuel them with energy, really. That's really energy demanding. And pass the torch. That requires trust. It means that you're aligned. You have understood you've got a common mission. Now you can just trust the people to carry on, and you're not going to be constantly there leading. As I said, again, it's easier said than done, but hopefully it gives you a little glimpse into how a community can be built on 3 stages, which is a little bit what I was trying to do with you here with the Mexican wave. Well, we became a mini community that lasted for about a minute. Each one had a different role. There were the early adopters, there were the laggers. At the end, pretty much everyone. I saw the ones who didn't do it. I'll talk to you afterwards. So, after sharing with you these 3 stages, also the dimensions that you need to activate when you work in a community. And again, based on our experience, you need to work on the people, identify the key people, who are the initiators, who are the ones who are going to champion the cause of that community. You need a place, and here I believe very much in the power of place, not because I'm a trained architect, but because I believe places can become catalysts. They crystallize the energy of a community. I think, Martin, you said earlier in the first panel discussion, we still need in real life, IRL experiences. There's, of course, technology that enables, technology that is shared, and I'm here talking, I think, to preach into the converted. Certainly there's people in this audience that know much more than me about how technology can enable community building. And you need processes. By processes, I mean rituals, you need certain things that are common, language that is shared by the community, that can also evolve, but you need that common language. Mm-hmm. Okay, and if this was not enough, and if some of you are still doubtful about what I'm here proposing to you, I've got proof. I've got really a couple of examples. When, again, the Zentrum asked me about future proof, I like always looking back at things that have been around for centuries, for millennia. Those are really real future-proof organizations. And I've got here a couple of examples which are a little provocative. But one is religion, and the other one is football clubs. Or football clubs maybe less old. Religions, certainly, spiritual systems have been around for a long time. They have proven very resilient. They have central places. They have, these kind of temples, cathedrals, stadiums, in the case of football teams. Places where you can really feel the fervor, the passion, where that community, that ecosystem comes together. But they've also been very cunning, very smart in networking themselves. With religion, it's a decentralized network of churches or chapels, or, in the most remote of places. You can't build a cathedral in a remote island in the Outer Hebrides, but you can build a little temple, a little chapel, and that's enough for that religion to say, I'm here to support you people. Oh well, clubs have done this also in a very smart way through pay-per-view following online or on TV. And then also, at some point, you need to distribute the power. And again, talking about distributed autonomous organizations. You can let people just pray. Well, here it's the Catholic rosary. Many religions have their own ways of distributing the capacity to connect to spirituality. Football teams have the Panini stickers that my kids love. They spend hundreds of francs. I can't wait till the next World Cup. All right, well, in a nutshell, and not trying to get us all too distracted or wasting too much time here, but something important is community building needs to be authentic, keep it real, keep it simple as well, keep it fun. I think, Lucas, you mentioned it this morning, functional. Fun is really important. I believe that as well in that. And keep it hybrid. I think the No One is One is a perfect example of a hybrid experience. It lives in a digital space, it lives in a physical space, it brings people together. We are queuing there, we're having conversations around that. So, without further ado, thank you very much. Let's have a great panel discussion now. Thank you.
So now we know what we need. We just need a new religion. So I'd love to welcome for the last panel discussion, along with Kay, Dr. Stefan Holzer, co-founder of Veritic, a company that makes NFTs more user-friendly and secure by providing an institutional NFT infrastructure. And as well, Lena Effinger, here we go, psychologist and senior consultant, and as well trainee at Energy Factory St. Gallen. That's a consulting company in the areas of leadership and culture transformation. Welcome. And as well, Simone, here we go, Emmanuel Schmidt. Hoppa. All right. Solutions engineer at Edge & Nod, the initial team behind the graph. What a nice round again. Thank you very much for being here. As we just heard from your input, future-proof companies is like the over topic we're going to talk in this session. And with your background, Stefan, as well as at McKinsey and Bank Vontobel, you know the corporate world. We have now heard a lot of examples and ideas as well from the whole morning of the potential of Web3. What does it take to kind of make the corporate world to embrace that?
I think it will take time first. The corporate world needs to get used to new ways of working, new ways of ownership, as we discussed. And I mean, some companies are already working into this direction. They're building a sense of community among the employees. I think this will further increase. We will potentially also see companies giving parts of the ownership to to the employees in more ways, and also incentivizing them in different ways. And this is, of course, partially different than what many companies right now are doing. And I think it will mainly take time. It will take the courage, as you say, to start. Typically, companies start like maybe with a small subset to test it out, how it works, and then use it as a flagship project to incentivize like other employees to join in this way and start a community in a small part of the company, and then expand to the entire company and learn from that. So I think that's probably what will happen, very similar to digitalization. It also started in some parts of the community, and then it expanded to the entire company.
Lena, as well from your perspective, from your work, but as well from your perspective as a psychologist, what would you say makes a company a future-proof company?
I think there's many answers to that, depending on what the company is as of today. I think you always have to be kind of aware of what you're talking about, because a company is not like one is not the other. From maybe combining the roles I have from the Energy Factory and as a psychologist, what we have in common, those both roles, is we're trying to look at research a lot. And since we from the Energy Factory working together with the University of St. Gallen, what we see, for example, is that it's been so many years ago already that we can kind of see that companies that acknowledge the fact that new work needs new culture as well, that they actually have an advantage. Not only when it comes to fluctuation numbers, but also to innovation or even growth. So I think that's pretty much what we have to kind of look at when we talk about Web3. We look from the techie side, but we definitely need to look also from the cultural side, because it doesn't serve anything if we have the best infrastructure, but people don't use it.
Simon, you've been nodding now a lot. From your perspective, what she just said, like the new way of work, do you have an expertise in this, or kind of like a good example? How are you doing it within the Graph?
Yeah, it might be interesting. Like the Graph by itself started as a fully remote company. And so that was kind of before Corona, one of those pioneers that do this. It was actually common in the blockchain space, but otherwise not so much. And then with kind of the creation of the Graph Foundation and the token launch, it started to decentralize more. So there are now core devs. That's why I work for Edge and Node and not for the Graph, because the Graph by itself is a protocol. But to go back to that point is, interestingly, Edge and Node has now a physical space in San Francisco, where we try to come together, but not only with us as a company, but also with the broader ecosystem to really sit together and work on problems together. And I think the reason to do this is that it is kind of a fact that at some point to have innovation creation happening, you need to be together. But in my personal opinion, to get work done, I'd like to be alone.
But that's so true.
Yeah.
Maybe I've been a little bit too fast. Can you, because I'm really honest, with all the speakers, I had the most time I needed for the work of Simon. So could you explain it in your words, or better said, how would you explain what you're doing to your grandma?
Yeah, I do something with computers. No, I mean, like in a nutshell, like I'm solutions engineer. That translates probably to German as a technology consultant, and we were in German it would be.
I'm sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you.
It's okay. Yeah, technology consultant, the Technologieberater.
All right.
That's what I say. Usually the conversation is over then. But like the thing is with the Graph protocol that I work on and that I integrate with different teams, it's a very technical data protocol that sits between the blockchain and the user interfaces. And my job is to work with those teams together and make the integration good.
The same question for you. Can you really quick explain, like in 3 sentences, what Veritic is doing?
Yeah, sure. I mean, you have heard about NFTs earlier today. And so currently the way you're taking care of the NFTs is you have it in your self-custody wallet, which can be secure or maybe not, depending on your setup. But in the cryptocurrency space right now, we have like custodians that are taking care of the security for you, and they're making it very user-friendly to interact with the NFT. With the cryptocurrency, which is not the case for NFTs yet. And we are basically taking what people have done in the cryptocurrency space and bring it to the NFT space. Like these 10 years of experience that custodians collected, we bring the same infrastructure, the same security and user-friendliness now to the NFT space, that you can log in with a so-called Web2 interface, that you know, for example, from your e-banking. And there you can buy and manage all your NFTs. You don't need to have your own wallet. And also for companies, for example, when they want to have NFTs, they sometimes cannot do it because of regulatory reasons. They need to have an external wallet provider, which is something we could do. And yeah, we're working a lot on infrastructure, on security, and business development right now, of course. Yeah.
Lena, when it comes to your role as a consultant, what's the biggest challenge you're facing?
I think we're missing the recipe people ask for. So someone said it before. I think it's very important to just be courageous here. Because, I mean, you can look that up also. There are so many interesting studies, and we've also have had some longitudinal studies where we kind of looked over several years into companies trying to define what makes a company future-proof when it comes to being profit-wise successful and also in adapting to the new way of working, whatever that means. I mean, we saw the big possibilities here today. And I think that my biggest challenge would be that if people approach us, they say, we want to either get better or something is wrong. And the question would be, how do we solve this? And that's, I think, something that is very human. And there it comes back to me being a psychologist, because then you have, what do you have to do? You have to ask. You have to ask first and then understand, and I think that's the biggest challenge, because people need to invest into answering first. And yeah, I think that's it. And I love to find not a recipe, but a solution.
What I really loved to come to a solution is your slide about sparking the flame, and then hopefully stoke the flame and then pass the torch. How can we spark the flame if the spark is not here?
You think that spark is not here?
Okay, here we go. Okay, so let's say when the spark is here, like how can we kind of like stoke the flame then?
It requires some disruptors. I think that you can't play by the rules. That's really important. And you know, I was the one who asked about sort of the legal question before, but at the same time, I think you need to play with, and we heard that before, playing with. You need to play with the fringes, and you know, play it a little dangerous, be courageous. I mean, you might fail, but you need to push the boundary, and you need to identify those people. They are not the early adopters, not even the early adopters. They become before. They are almost crazy, and there are probably some of them in this room who said, yes, we can definitely turn this into a real hub, and I can definitely find like-minded people. I can definitely convince maybe in corporations some inbound disruptors to play along, but it requires that level of craziness at the beginning.
I love the craziness. So, speaking about the, no, sorry, you wanted to admit something.
Can I add something?
Yes, sure.
Thank you so
Go
much.
ahead.
The experiment you did in the beginning with the waving hands, I think that was something we can take a message out of that is different from yours. Because I think that whatever we do when we approach new things, humans need model learning. So we're always talking about the change curve, right? With the early adopters, the late followers, the laggards, blah, blah, blah. But we need model learning. And I think this is so valuable to see, because if you would have not responded to him, nothing would have happened. And if you would have been maybe even a little less autocratic with continuing with this gesture, then we would have reached a self-sustaining system, which is what we're aiming for whenever we do change, right? You want to go out of it at some point. So if we would have accepted the fact that we are doing the wave ourselves, because we would have understood the system after we have learned it from you, giving it there to model learning, then we would all have followed. And then the question would have been, who stops it, right? So that's, I think, something from psychology we can really transfer into whatever we have been talking about here today. Go out there, find models, be curious, ask questions, and then try and be courageous, because that's something we've had in the break. We have been having a discussion before. And then to like tiny experiments, because only with experiments you can learn how to transfer to your own space, I think, because otherwise you can't do it with the recipe, and you need to have a space to fail. So do experiments, and by the way, whenever experiments are lasting long, something's wrong, stop them.
Like to have the space to try out, to learn, to fail, but also to have like small steps of success, I think. And you're saying with Veritic, you will make NFTs more user-friendly. We heard it before in the panel before, nor in the discussion before. More user-friendly means what in your case? How are you doing that?
Yeah, I mean, right now, if you want to buy an NFT or you want to interact with it, how it usually works, you first need to sign up at a crypto exchange. You need to buy cryptocurrency. That takes maybe a few days until like all these regulatory processes are cleared. Then you need to like set up your own wallet to interact with the blockchain, which might also take some time for some people. I mean, even for me, when I did it the first time, it took a few hours, to really get the seed phrase stored in the right way somewhere so nobody steals it from me. Because if you lose it, you lose all your NFTs in your crypto basically. And then you need to log in with that into an NFT exchange and buy your NFTs. So that's, I mean, for general NFTs. There are like a few NFTs that you can also already buy now in easier ways. But how we make it more user-friendly, basically, you can sign in with your email address. You have like maybe a two-factor authentication, like with your e-banking on your phone. You enter this code, and then you're secure. Then you can interact with all your NFTs, and that's making it much easier. I mean, that's also how cryptocurrency went mainstream. I mean, if you think back 10 years ago, there were maybe a few 100,000 people using Bitcoin. And you had to physically meet to exchange Bitcoin, basically, right? You had to pay cash. Yeah. And now, today, you have so many different exchanges and custodians. It's so easy that 300 million people own cryptocurrency. And we need the same for NFTs. And also at the same level of security, of course. Because at the beginning of the cryptocurrency craze, about 20% of Bitcoins got lost. Another 5 to 10% got hacked. And we shouldn't repeat the same with NFTs.
So when it comes to user friendliness, was the key security or trust?
It's that, I mean, user friendliness is in terms that you understand what you're doing and you can do it fast and you know where to click next, basically, right? And currently, if you set up your own wallet, you easily need like a friend to help you kind of who has done it before, if you're not like in the tech space. Or you need to like browse online and find maybe some tutorials, maybe from the wallet provider. Yeah. But in the end, I think I noted down the steps somewhere that you need to buy an NFT, and you need currently like 16 or 17 steps, and it can take a few days even, depending on how fast you are, with which kind of providers you're working, and like there are, as I mentioned, some platforms where you can buy some NFTs fast, but not all, but we want to provide it for all. And with our platform, it can take 30 seconds in the end. You pay with credit card. Yeah.
I really quickly want to come back to another point we've been talking before we switch to user friendliness. It's the failure culture. How do you make sure, Simon, within your team, that there is space and room for a failure culture?
We don't make any mistakes, actually.
All right. Mr. Perfect.
No, sure, no, sure. I mean, like the culture generally. I mean, like if you are working with people together, then it's very important that if someone makes a mistake, that they are not pointed at. And I think in our culture, it's like if mistakes happen, it's always the focus is on like what can we do better, and it's never like why didn't you I don't know, protect your seed phrase or whatever. It's kind of like we try always to come up with solutions to the problems after they happen without making people feel guilty, and that's important, I think, because like then I also know like I can do mistakes, and it's okay because we learn together, and it doesn't feel bad on me personally.
Community activation. Okay, you talked about it in your presentation, how much human being means in a future-proof company. What can you say about like the failure culture, or how do you experience it?
The fail culture.
Yeah, or how would you say is a good way to deal with it? Because in our world, I also have a bit kind of like the experience of it's not really existing, doing failures. We still have that within, that failures are something really bad. And I think to move on, and what we just hear also from Lena, it's really important to have this space of, and we also heard it before from Lukas and Marlon as well, to play with it, and if there is no failure culture, you can't really play, or you can't really try out a new way of work. So, yeah.
I think it's a good question, and there are flip sides to this coin. You know, when you bring people together, when you create a community, there's also social pressure that comes with that. Suddenly you're surrounded, there are expectations, or sometimes inbound, like you create expectations for yourself, that all these people in this community, my peers, they're expecting me to perform like this, to do that. So I think that's I would say the negative side of the community building. How to overcome it? I don't have the formula. I think it's important to understand the diversity, and I think we heard it earlier as well. I think, Ayla, you mentioned the importance of diversity and creating a bit of controversy as well. That the community is not made out of people who all think the same. They are moved maybe by the same mission, or they have the same ideals, but they behave differently, and they have different perspectives on. And the moment you accept that, I think failure takes a different perspective, right? Because you're not. I think you have less expectations of this person is going to do this and that because I believe it's like that. No, that person is probably different than me. We have the same ideals, and maybe that person's approach is different, and maybe what I consider a failure for that person is an amazing success.
We heard a lot about the place where to work, how to work, different kind of like ways of work, and also now user-centered. How can we do it more? Enable people to be part of it, but how can we be bolder, or how can we kind of like motivate companies to be bolder? Because as I hear, all the ideas are already here. Leno.
I start out and you just add it up, okay? We are having the title of future-proof companies, right? When I just listened to you and your question now, I think we have to acknowledge that we're not starting from the scratch like you did with the Next Generation Village. So please maybe think of how can we combine the both worlds best, and acknowledge the fact that companies are there usually for a purpose. And first thing first, you need to have a cash flow. And thereby I would say you always have to sustain this also, right? Because otherwise you don't have any legitimation or budget to innovate, and I think many of the companies are right there. They need to kind of secure their cash flow, their efficiency, their whatever they can do best, like their core business, while still innovating for tomorrow. And I think that is maybe something we would have to take into account if we look at that we are consciously trying to do new stuff and not like saying, hey, we're flipping the coin now, and we're trying to be super new and like disruptive at all. I don't think that's working, because then we're really like, we're running over the people. People need to have a why to change, otherwise they won't follow. And I think maybe that's, you maybe know the concept of ambidexterity, and I think that is something that is very important when we think of these very far away innovations, because only if you encourage people that there might be something in for them, right? Doesn't matter if you're a profit or non-profit organization, but people need to know their profit of being at the company. And if you kind of maybe tell them it's both hands, being good at what you do now, but also be open to develop and be innovative, then I think that might be a real good future-proof recipe for companies to sustain. I think that might be something, and failure culture, by the way, adds to this. Failures or mistakes have to be treated so differently if you're in an efficiency-oriented, high-quality, high-security context versus doing mistakes in an innovative creativity context. And I think that might be also something very important to talk about and to teach before you even start of, I don't know, whatever you do, changing, innovating, whatever. Be clear about that. Make the people part of it and make them understand there's a difference in these two worlds. And both might be actually the future. Does that make sense?
It makes sense for sure. Yes. And to talk about failures, I've once done a round of like talking about failures. It was called Fuck Up Friday or something. And I was so amazed by what that's done to me within talking about it. I've been so nervous about talking this huge failures, and all the others were sharing it as well. And it was such a different atmosphere, and it felt not as a failure anymore afterwards. We're open up for the questions or like for inputs, expertises from you. If there are any questions or if you want to state something, be part of the round. There were different topics here. Just give a sign to Stefan, he's over there waiting with his microphone. Don't be shy, even I'm hungry. Here we go, Ayla.
Hey, very interesting talk. This community activation stuff is so important. I was wondering what you think about traditional companies using DAOs as like a platform for innovation and seeding ideas.
I can answer that maybe. Because it's maybe interesting to see how the graph evolves. So initially there was one team, kind of a centralized entity, the Graph Inc. And then they see that, okay, it will be a protocol, so it needs to have a token. Then token was launched, and it was kind of the first core dev was spinned out into Edgenode. That's the company I work for, and the graph was just like a foundation that is the treasury and stewardship. It's kind of a common team, right? And then new core dev teams were hired into that, which are separate entities. They do not have kind of interrelationships, only with the graph. And now the Graph Foundation starts to spin out DAOs for specific actions. So for example, there is the Advocates DAO, which actually comes back to the question before, kind of how can you activate the community? And that's one idea. So you say like, okay, we create now a DAO, and people can apply for that DAO. The DAO should organize itself. Initially, they receive money from the foundation, but interestingly, it's kind of how they organize, it's up to them. And what they need to, but their mission is to spread awareness about the graph. And so you have this kind of clear set of mission or vision, and then you give it, you have some kind of money stream coming in. Eventually it could be self-sustainable. And then like the cool thing is like there were 10,000s of applications to become an advocate in the Advocates DAO. Now they have kind of this path where you can progress. First, you just kind of on Twitter say you're an advocate, but then if you work your way up, then you receive maybe some NFTs that say like now you're in the higher level, and you can gamify the engagement with those DAOs. So that's very interesting to see.
Is there another question? If not, I'd love to come back to your example of the church and the sport example as well. You've been talking about the mission right now, Simon, and we heard it from Martin at the beginning with the goal you kind of need, but everybody of the community has like its own, or like people who are working together has its own interpretation of a mission or a goal. How do you make sure that all the guys who work together are aligned? Maybe you also can answer it, Simon. Or
yeah, I think, but it's true like that. I think the initial team, they need to be very strong in their vision and mission and communicate that. And then also, later on, I think as more as a community grow, you kind of need to have this shepherdship that you say like if people deviate a little bit, then you say like why, but we go for this and to clear this up, because otherwise it could also a little bit flock out, because I mean a lot of people, they're just coming for the money and not for the cause, and you kind of need to be careful to only attract those that come for the money. But I think especially now in these market conditions, it's a little bit easier.
Maybe I can add a story to that.
go ahead.
Because I think it's such a groundbreaking question, is it? Like, how can I transfer a purpose or make people be motivated and engaged in whatever? And I just had a very nice story to see, because someone said before that if you, I think it was Martin, if you put a company entirely to remote, at some point they might just be detached. Well, I'm actually working with a company since 3 years now, and we're doing a survey each year on culture and also on leadership. And they have been, since the beginning of the pandemics, they were fully remote. They were forced to. So until now, they're not allowed to come back together, which is for some a bit of a pain, I'd say, but that's how they decided to do it. And the most astonishing thing to me is that we just finished the third survey, actually. We saw that the identification and the feeling of we or us was actually increasing over the years. And I think it was also because we were putting a finger on that and saying, hey, it's important to take care of the team and not just make them people go apart. And what I also could see, and that's the story I wanted to share, last year we saw that the understanding and the commitment to the strategy was like decreasing, because you always ask that as well, because people need to know where the company is going to actually go into the same direction, right? Because otherwise they'd be like, hey, speedboats, but not the same direction. And when we saw actually a decline in that, we went out there and built a network of multiplicators who were actually supporting the leaders remotely to talk about the strategy and like really define what is the team doing to the strategy, what's their part in the bigger picture. And when we saw what they actually asked, gave us an answer this year, can you imagine that 3/4 of the entire company, and I'm talking about employees, not leaders, said, I can explain the strategy and I'm convinced it's the right one. And I'm like, oh, that's amazing, because if you make people part of it, and if you make actually network a advantage, and you strengthen the leaders, because I think you need someone who's transferring the message by now. I'm super stoked, because I didn't contribute anything. I only set the topic and gave some ideas how to approach it, but they did the deal themselves. We only had the multiplicators that were there. And I think that's so great. It comes back to that church thing, like kind of a central topic, then you distribute, then you make the network work.
I come back as well to this church topic, or like I stay in this language. When it comes to Veritic, Stefan, how do you make sure that you stay on the right path?
Well, we are also a distributed team. So we work in Zurich, Zug, Berlin, a few other locations. And what we do, like basically every few months, we have like an offsite for 1 week where the entire company meets and we are all together discussing our strategy. I mean, of course, in between, I'm also like thinking about strategy when we need to change certain ways to approach the market, and also the market is changing all the time, of course. Yeah. But I think like we are still a small team, so it's easier, of course, than in a big company that everybody is aligned on the strategy and is working towards that. Yeah. But as we grow, I mean, it's getting more difficult, right?
Is there another question that involves Ayla? It's all right to have a second one though, Stefan, or over there as well. Good. I can hear your stomach. Hör eure Bücher, wir sind bald beim Mittag. Go ahead.
Do we still have time? Okay.
Yes, sure.
All right. I wonder, I mean, when I hear you talking, the connection with Web3 and future-proof companies leaves me with the question, is the future really decentralized? Because we see sometimes we start with hierarchies and then people try to decentralize and they end up again with hierarchies. Or in a sense, you say, Stefan, that we need more centralized custodial solutions so people can actually use the technology. Then I wonder, is decentralization really part of the future? Haven't we figured it out? Because in a sense, for now, we often replicate the existing hierarchical systems just with a new technology. And it could do more, but what do you think? Is it actually realistic that it could do more and be more decentralized?
I mean, I think we could be more decentralized, but centralization, I believe, will very likely always be a big part of society. Like some people, they don't want to take ownership of their own life, right? They want to be guided. And we cannot tell them now, you have to do it. I mean, they don't want it, right? We need to be flexible. And I mean, decentralization is giving at least those people who want to live in a decentralized way the opportunity to do it now, which was before not always the case. I mean, but at the same time, there have been also companies before that worked very much in a DAO structure, I would say. Like, for example, many of the big consultancies like McKinsey, BCG, and so on, they had like 2,000 partners. They all own equity in the company. They have like governance mechanisms. Like, all are sort of equal. I mean, not exactly, of course, but they all have their shares. They can vote for it. And that were actually very similar structures to DAOs. And I think now this is simply expanding. I mean, this has been there before, and it has different technology support now to do it in much more efficient ways, even for small companies. And I think we're simply creating options for people. Also, I, as a custodian, of course, we're centralizing NFTs again, but the underlying structure is decentralized. You can always take it out of custody whenever you want. You can put it back. I know many people who worked in a decentralized way with cryptocurrencies and decided to put their currencies into custody at some point, but they thought it's safer. Maybe I don't get attacked, who knows. Yeah. And it's simply creating more options. Yeah. And I think the very important part is of Web3 that the data will not be owned by a single entity, but by all of us, basically. And then you can decide what you do with the data. If you want like one company controlling your data, or if you do it yourself, whatever is easiest for you. It's just creating options in the end, I would say.
To add on really quick before we come to the last question, you started decentralized, and then now you have the office in LA. Did I get that right?
Yeah.
Why? It's the other way around.
It's not an office in terms of like, I don't need to move to San Francisco, thanks God. But it is about having a space. I think that they acknowledge, similar to the Full Node in Berlin, that like people should have a place to come together, but they don't have to. But I think to answer, also to give something to that question is, decentralization is just a tool, and with decentralized technology, we can have like, we build new stuff. I mean, Ethereum by itself, for example, is a very good example of how decentralized collaboration works. But in some way, it's also centralized because you have like Vitalik, which is so very important figure, and then you have the Ethereum Foundation. But still, like when you look at it, how it is actually developed with the different core dev teams, now with the layer 2 rollup teams, and with all the protocols that build upon, then this is decentralization. But for some stuff, a centralized and hierarchical organization is probably better. I think with new technologies, it doesn't make like one-to-one old stuff better, but it kind of just opens new avenues, and we need to explore those.
Last question from Ayla.
Thank you. One of the things that we struggle with is psychological safety versus encouraging really like lively and diverse discussion and disagreement. Does any of you have a good answer for how one balances those two things?
Can you repeat that?
So balancing psychological safety, a safe space where people feel like, you know, they can have fun and feel good, and balancing that with a space where people are also encouraged to challenge and maybe challenge each other and challenge ideas, or like disagree or call out when something maybe isn't right. Sort of balancing those two things. I'm just curious if anyone has good answers.
I think that really depends on the way you challenge people in the end. Like, if you have, for example, a very strong feedback culture where you are trained on giving feedback in the right way, you know, you're also like helping people to do their job better in the end, then they're also more happy. But of course, you should have like team norms, for example. Like some people might prefer to have feedback right on the spot. Others, they might have it only like every 2 weeks or every 1 month or so. Yeah. But that's something I think each team in a company might even set up individually. And then you have, again, like decentralized teams that all might have different subcultures, so to speak, to make everybody feel comfortable, but also ensure they're improving over time. That's my approach. Yeah.
I would also definitely go first, please. Go.
Well, I have a couple to add. You heard me earlier talking about rituals and how important rituals are. Rituals are things that people share, and they have certain rules, and they have certain periodicity, and they begin, they finish, and then maybe they start again later on. In our studio, we have a couple that I'd like to share maybe with you. One which happens every 2 weeks, and this is almost religious. Every 2 weeks, Monday, 5:30 p.m., so yesterday, last night, we have a sprint celebration. And we celebrate together, but I mean, it's not just throwing a party and opening bottles of beer. We actually celebrate a project's success. So we choose a team who have something they're proud of, they share it, we acknowledge the effort, we acknowledge the achievement, the learnings. They also share with us their struggles so that we can all learn. And well, obviously we clap, we have fun. That's one. And then we have another one which we organize ad hoc, and it's triggered by people that we don't call them custodians, but it would be something like that within our organization. People, for instance, like me, I'm not involved in every project deep down, but I have an overview. And sometimes I see my colleagues, our teams, struggling with subjects, getting stuck. So I suggest them, why don't you organize a project Quake? Quake as in an earthquake, but project Quake. So earthquakes can be very disruptive, destructive as well. So you organize a project Quake, you invite colleagues who have nothing to do with your project, they know very little, you give them very little information actually, and you tell them, this is what I'm doing, this is where I am, and I'm stuck. And they destroy you, and they rebuild you. And but you know that that's the energy, you know that's the behavior. You don't take the critique personally, no one is hurt. You know the ritual. And at the end of the project Quake, which lasts 45 minutes, you've rebuilt it. And everyone's friends again. So there you are, a couple of, but again, it's a matter of language. People know these words, people know they're entering a sprint celebration, or people know they're entering a project Quake.
I think that's very important to frame it, you know, that you also with our feedback sessions that are every few weeks, you know, we have exactly this time where we are prepared for it mentally. Yeah. And not, I mean, as I said, you know, it depends on the person. If they prefer to get feedback on the spot, we do that. But if they say, oh, I want to have like those sessions and they're prepared for it, and then it's perfectly fine. Yeah.
One last quote from Lena, and then we have to finish.
Pretty briefly,
Yes.
don't talk about the how if you haven't cleared the what. Go back to the concept of psychological safety. It contains what you're looking for. There is no imbalance. Go back to it. Google Amy Edmondson. It's not about being nice and harmonic. It's actually about what risk am I perceiving if I open up talking about failures or uncertainties. Go back to the concept. Take it to win a coffee, or what was that you have, the platform you're talking about. Talk about it. This concept is so great, but it actually is no imbalance in there. Go back to the what before you go into the how. That would be my recommendation.